Someone who has, I think, had less of a lucky year, although, frankly, it's hard to imagine when the last time he thought he might have had a good year, is, of course, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, someone who until this year still was the Duke of York, still was Prince Andrew, still was part, albeit a distant part by that point, of the royal firm. Now he finds himself exiled from the family, although it still has to be said, living on royal property and on some level, we believe, at the expense of the king, and therefore on some level at the expense of us, because no one has ever been able to delineate to me the difference between private and public when it comes to the royal family. They are, to get a little bit Louis XIV about all of these things, the state, and the state on some fundamental level belongs to us. But Andrew now finds himself a ghost at the royal court and a ghost in British public life. And it is a ghost nonetheless that cannot be ignored, because as we saw over the weekend, we see yet more photographs of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor as part of the newly released cache of Epstein documents, or the Epstein Files. Former Prince Andrew at Sandringham, lying across the laps of 5 elegantly dressed women as Ghislaine Maxwell looks on behind them. Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein in these photographs on a shoot near Balmoral, the 3 of them peering down from the royal box at Ascot. The images, as I say, part of the Epstein Files released by the US Department of Justice on Friday. Snapshots taken at the most exclusive VIP locations required, basically provide further proof, if it were needed, that Charles had no choice but to strip him of his titles, and quite frankly, that this was the least that could potentially happen to him. Because, of course, he remains, despite it all, in the line of succession. He is not fit, apparently, to be a prince, but theoretically, at least, he is fit to be a king, because Parliament doesn't seem to want to do anything about it. And I want to make 2 arguments and have 2 sort of points of conversation in this hour of the show with you. One is about the narrower one, which is precisely that, whether Andrew, what possible legitimacy, what possible reason there can be, given everything we now know, everything that might yet be released, the fact that he may be dragged or forced or compelled in some way, they can't do it legally, but he might feel he has no choice, but to testify before the United States Congress about what he knew about Epstein and his role in that affair, something, of course, he continues to deny to this day, all of the allegations that are put against him. Despite the fact, all of those things, that apparently Parliament does not want to do anything to remove this man who we believe is not fit to be the Duke of York, is not fit to have lots of obscure and pointless titles that were given to him, but is potentially fit to be the king of this country if some disaster were to happen. And even if not some disaster, then the very fact that with everything that he is accused of, and the fact that the royal family have effectively on some level believed he had, said that they believe he has something about which to be ashamed by stripping him of all of these titles, because if they didn't believe that, why would they have done it? That this man, just as a point of legitimacy, can still be in the line of succession. That I can go on to the royal family website right now and see his name there, despite the fact that we know all of the things that he is accused of, and on some level, the royal family have conferred that they believe he has something to be ashamed of because they have stripped him of those titles, yet he still is in our royal line of succession. I want to talk to you about that, but more than that, I want to talk to you about the royal family itself. We talked in the last hour about whether the politics of Brexit are shifting. I wonder whether we might look back on 2025 and maybe what is yet to happen in 2026 as a moment when the calculus of the politics around the royal family in Britain shifted in a fundamental way as well. Perhaps this was always going to happen in the long years after the Queen's death and the loss of that ballast of the royal family, although it's almost kind of forbidden or verboten to say it. But the Queen herself, the late Queen, of course, her role in protecting Andrew, and who knows, the money that she's given to him to pay for his legal battles and so on over the years, also probably deserves more scrutiny than it is received. But I wonder whether Prince Andrew reminds us of something fundamental, and the fact that he is still there, day after day, with everything that he's been accused of, still on some level part of the royal firm, has serving and is serving to remind us of the fundamental folly of monarchy overall. And it's something that was put much better 2.5 centuries ago, going on for, by Tom Paine when he wrote his book Common Sense. He said this: one of the strongest natural proofs of the folly of the hereditary right in kings is that nature disapproves of it. Otherwise, she would not so frequently turn it into ridicule by giving mankind an ass for a lion. What does he mean by that? Well, he means that with hereditary monarchy, with having a family which is bred to rule, is bred to be the state and to embody the state, then you are just as likely to get a knave or a fool or a crook or something worse than you are for a hero. For every Elizabeth II, you get a Prince Andrew. For every Elizabeth I, you get a mad king like King George III. For every hero, you can get a fool or you can get something worse. And I wonder whether Prince Andrew is a living embodiment of that we are all relearning that lesson again, because for so long we had someone, for 70 years, the longest stretch, longest reign in British history, we had someone who so perfectly seemed to embody the role of constitutional monarch, who, sometimes a bit of a cliche to say that she never put her foot wrong, but the common perception was that Elizabeth II never put a foot wrong. And yet, as long as Andrew is around, even without the titles, even without being prince, he embodies the absurdity of that system, that you never know what you're going to get. You're always going to get the roll of the dice. Again, for every Elizabeth or Charles or a William or whatever it happens to be, if you like any of those, what else do you get? You get a sorry lineup of people who clearly on some level the royal family destroys. You get a Princess Margaret, you get a Prince Andrew, you get people who in whatever way seem to be ruined partly by this institution. And then there's another question as well, and this is the thing that I think you can't avoid with these Epstein pictures. These Epstein pictures don't reveal a hidden conspiracy. What they expose, yet again, is something more banal and yet more damning, and it's this. It's about how power works. It's about how power is worked and lent and laundered in this country in plain sight. Prince Andrew was nobody. He was a thicko royal. That's what he was. He was a thicko royal who, as far as anybody could see, yes, he had some distinguished record in the military. But he, beyond that, once he'd left the military, didn't seem to do a great deal. No one knew what to do with him. They gave him a trade envoy job. They gave him this. They gave him that. How do you solve a problem like Prince Andrew? He seemed to believe he was a man who believed far more in his own abilities than nature might imply, or than what he deserved. He wasn't involved in running Epstein's operation. He didn't need to. He was valuable to Epstein because what he gave Epstein was legitimacy. He gave Epstein legitimacy because of his name, because of his blood, because of the House of Windsor. And that was something that he was born in. And what is really disturbing, and I think should make us think about our monarchy, what's really disturbing is that basically Epstein was aided and abetted by our name, because it's our royal family, by our country. His relationship with Andrew conferred a legitimacy on him. It opened doors for him. It gave him access to power and to people and to places that this man, from whom most people and about whom most people had never heard. That's why he liked Andrew. Did he like him personally? Maybe he did, we don't know. But he liked him. But if he'd been some fella he'd met on, walking down Fifth Avenue in New York, would he have liked him as much? No, of course not. He liked him because he was a prince, and we gave him that title. He traded off not just his name, not just his blood, not just his whatever he did day after day, but he traded off us and our name and our country. And I wonder whether we should use this as a moment to seriously rethink our relationship with our own royal family, whether it needs to be changed. And for all of the nonsense that is talked about, tourism and the stability it brings and all of that sort of stuff, as fundamental questions as to whether that is the case. It doesn't seem to be bringing us much stability right now. Andrew is an ongoing diplomatic sore between us and the United States, and God knows we don't need any of those right now. The question isn't whether, at this point, Prince Andrew broke the law. That is for others to judge. It is whether he should ever be allowed to lend legitimacy to anyone at all, whether he should be still in the the line of succession, something that still gives him legitimacy, why Parliament can't get it off its backside and legislate to remove him from the line of succession, which they have done with kings and princes before, and also whether we might not think very, very, very seriously about whether we should let others use the royal legitimacy, our name, to aid others in the future, whether this is a system which needs fundamental reform or maybe even abolition. 0345 6060 973 0345 6060 973. Is this a year, the coming year, when we rethink our relationship with the monarchy, courtesy of the former Prince Andrew?